Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Fail series, where we're talking about our ugly failures. You can see some of the failures happening behind me in my new studio. But anyway, nonetheless, this is the sentiments of the show. But with me on the line is none other than the man, the legend, Anton Anderson, the CEO of a great company called Elite Resource Team. That's elitert.com if you want to check it out. Anton, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks so much, man. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, that's great, man. So why don't you kick us off with the elevator pitch, Anton? What do we need to know? What are you guys up to there?
I mean, our whole business is focused on one concept, which is our industry, which is financial services, is really outdated in terms of the way they think about professionals collaborating. So our elevator pitch, per se, is we teach financial advisors and CPAs how to collaborate with one another to provide better results for their clients.
So are they not by nature collaborative?
No, man, they're
Really?
adversaries. Yeah, you know, they don't play nicely in the sandbox traditionally. I think they're very different. There are different motives in terms of how they work with clients. You know, if you're talking about stereotypes across the industry. And they oftentimes at best cooperate, but typically they don't even do that. And collaboration is a whole different level than cooperation. Huh. So that's our whole mission, man. It's a calling to help professionals collaborate with one another, and ultimately the clients are, you know, really the best served.
So why don't they? I mean, or surely...
Well, I think if you remember that book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think that's financial advisors and CPAs in many ways. Financial advisors are a little bit more outgoing, perhaps a little bit more aggressive. They're oftentimes more driven by the opportunities, financial opportunities. CPAs tend to be a little bit more, well, as one defined himself to me, was a professional skeptic. You know, they move slow. They're always interested in, first and foremost, like, what's in the best interest of my client? And whatever I recommend, is it potentially going to come back to bite me in the butt? And if so, then I'm always just going to say I'm not comfortable. And so that kind of sets up this dichotomy or, you know, dynamic between the two professionals where they just end up more often than not at odds if they don't really understand each other's roles and they don't come together to work through those differences for their clients.
Alrighty. Well, sounds like a unique challenge, but we don't have time for that because we have to get on to the story of fail today. So Anton, what is your story of fail for our audience around the world?
Yeah, it's funny that was the tee up. I didn't even plan this, man, but the whole like opportunistic, aggressive probably is what's to blame for this, you know, story of failure. Early on, I was a financial advisor by trade. I mean, started at Smith Barney, worked through college. And shortly after graduating, just a couple years in the industry, so we're talking like 13, 14 years ago, I had an opportunity. This company reached out to me. I was familiar with some of their work, but didn't really know like what they had actually done behind the scenes, just kind of the stories I had heard. So they invite me out to dinner, and basically the opportunity is, we want you to buy in, not as an equity partner, but a revenue partner into the company we've built for $100,000, and you'll get 10% of the revenue. Okay, what was the revenue? Well, the revenue last year was just over $2 million. You know, so quick math is 10% of 2 million is over 200 grand, and I'm buying in for 100,000. You know, okay, well, that sounds exciting. And again, these guys were like probably 10, 15 years older than I was and kind of bigger names. So I was like, what an opportunity. This is exciting. So of course I go back and I talked to a business mentor I'd met when I was 19 years old. And I was like, you know, you're not going to believe this opportunity I has. Well, you know, have you seen the books? You know, where are the legal documents? And I was like, no. I mean, I asked for those things, but they said they weren't able to share those with me right now. But like, I know these guys are legit, right? These guys are legit. He kept pressing on me on, and I was like, you're trying to like kill this opportunity for me. Like, why aren't you excited? You know? And he's like, if you can't explain the logic of why it makes sense, it doesn't sound good out the gate. But I was, as I said earlier, I was young, I was opportunistic, I was aggressive. I saw this as a major opportunity and leap in my career. So I moved forward with the agreement. I didn't have 100 grand set aside at the time, but I think I had 28,000 that I put in liquid. And then the deal was they'd keep 100% of the commission on the business I closed until I reached 100 grand. Well, you fast forward 12 months and there was little warning signs along the way, but like when you're excited about something, you made a bad decision, you keep rationalizing that decision. So I kept rationalizing it through the year, and I get to the point where it's like 11 months in and I had made $12,000 in total, working like over full time. I stopped all of my other activities with clients and everything, and I had paid in six figures, or high fives, low six at that point, and I had like 12 grand to show for it. So we had a meeting, and it was shortly after Christmas. I won't forget, and it's just there was never any like clarity or anything other than like, oh, things are, they took a little dip, but they're starting to move again. They're starting to move. And it's like, right before the new year, I just had to pull the plug and walk on the whole thing. And later I thought about talking to an attorney and whatnot, but bottom line was like, I signed a dumb agreement. I had no verification. They told me they weren't going to show me verification. And I had no repercussions.
That sucks.
Yeah, well, I guess what I had was over 50 grand of credit card debt and like a tax tax income of like 12 grand for the entire year. Yeah.
That's a horrible story, man. So let's get into what you learned, buddy. So what did you learn from that experience?
I mean, two major things when I look back on it. One was trust, trust people, but verify. Now, I've heard that sentence, and it's always like trust, but verify, regardless of what you think, how excited you are, who you think these people are, whether or not they're, big shots in the industry or not, like always verify what you're being told. And then the second one that my mentor later told me was, if you can't explain why a deal makes sense, like if you can't explain it clearly so it makes logical sense, don't do it.
That's really good advice, right? I suppose it's always the hindsight thing, right? I suppose we're always having these, I think it's also quite interesting because I'm running another series now called Private Placement Perspectives. And I'm talking to VC firms, and it's quite interesting to know, like, listen, when I ask the same question, I'm like, listen, when you back a startup, like, what do you look for? And it's always the same thing. But I'm like, yeah, but how do you actually decide? No, I just, if I like the guy or the team, it's like, really? That's it? That's your thing? And that's what it is, man. It's the VC model, bro. It's like they're listening to a story, like you did, right? They're looking for a story. Does the story make sense? And then they do a bit of verification, like the due diligence. Are you actually hitting these numbers or whatever? But largely, it's subjective.
Yeah.
So there's no rule book for this stuff.
Yeah, which is probably why there's a bit of a barrier to entry. It's like if you're naive, you're going to get taken, out back every day. The guys that are making the good investments, they have experience, so they know somewhat like how to judge that. But even then, there's still a lot of those investments they're making that don't pop. They're kind of the home runs are the ones that are covering the losses.
Yeah, this one guy was like, I've made cut 100 checks in the last 5 years, and 95% of my return came from 4 of them. I mean,
yeah, and in that, in a way, is like when I look back on it. Well, I mean, that obviously the whole thing was just bad decision making from the beginning, but like I couldn't afford that. Like I emptied my savings just to invest. And then I stopped working with all my clients. I sold what I could. And, I had no income coming in. And then all the income I was making with them, they were going back to pay off the 100,000 of like, not equity, but revenue wasn't coming. It was just so dumb.
So let's go back in time, dude. What would you do differently if you could go back in time?
I think one thing I've learned many times over is just, you got to be really strategic and careful and thoughtful who you align yourself with in terms of business partners, mentors, who you hire if you're a business owner. I mean, the people that you're working with, and I don't know that you can appreciate that when you're young, but they have such a dramatic impact on the trajectory of your career. So what I would have done, obviously, as soon as somebody said, we've got an opportunity, I would have slowed down, moved the emotions out of the way and said, well, let's look at this logically, like verify for me, right? Like, let's look at some tax returns. If they can't show me that, like, I should walk right out the gate. Second thing I would have done is listen to my mentor. Like at the time he was in his upper 60s, he's passed away since, but I mean, he'd been around the block plenty of times where as soon as I said it, he knew. He's like, that something's not right there. But I was so like young and confident that this was a good opportunity. Nope. Moved his advice right to the side. You got to listen, man. You got to listen to all the people that have been in the game a little bit longer, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Who's currently your mentor now? I mean, have you got a mentor to like advise you in general now?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I have a business partner at Elite Resource Team named Paul Latham, who's an accountant by trade, and great track record. Sold his accounting firm for over 45 million. Took his second company public. Sold a third company that was sold for over 50 million. And I might have that order wrong, but that's his track record. And there's a fourth one. Phenomenal mentor. Thinks like an accountant. Very logical. Very step by step. Jonathan Cutton's another, mentor and very good friend. Cutton Wealth Management. He's Barron's Hall of Fame advisor. They manage like $8 billion of AUM. Really good guys and just different, So I'm always kind of trying to learn from the next level, whatever that means, from a, success perspective. And then from like a personal life perspective, my dad's like just one of the happiest men I've ever met. Retired elementary school teacher, retired at 57. And he's happy. He's like great family. He's done a wonderful job, like, leading us. And so I always try to kind of balance that out from a mentor perspective of just, business is fun. It's the game I'm in, but at the same time, like you got to keep your happiness going too.
Yeah. So let's talk about advice to CEOs, Anton. So let's talk about failure firstly. What is your advice to CEOs, entrepreneurs, in terms of like, the importance of failure in success in business?
Yeah. I mean, I think somewhat standard answer probably that I've heard, but is really important to keep in mind is just, it happens. I used to try to think of it like a Broadway performance where you organize all of the moving pieces. And so there's a flawless day, but the reality is it's like a football game. Like you don't have a game without a foul, an interception, a fumble, these things. So you kind of got to just go, I'm appreciating that there's always mistakes made. There's wrong hires. There's things you forgot, blah, blah, blah. And you just got to keep moving because ultimately at the end of the day, like if you're building something of value, then the failures are kind of insignificant in consequence. And then I think too is, probably what I mentioned a minute ago, just and again, my company's, relatively small and we're growing, but we're only 15 people right now. But I can tell you, I've learned many times over and over, the first like 2 to 3 hires you do are probably the most important because from there you start establishing a company culture. And if you want to grow something bigger than yourself, then it relies on the other people on your team. You want a rock star business, you need a rock star team. And then, so I guess that lesson is just be really selective in terms of who you surround yourself, mentors, partners, employees, friends, spouses, just everything across the board.
It's really, really good advice, man. Tell me, do you recommend any books or resources for entrepreneurs to use on their journey?
I mean, from a grit perspective, David Goggins' books, Can't Hurt Me. I mean, that's pretty like, just keep going because you're going to get knocked down a lot. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, I always reference back because it's probably one of the early books that was the most influential for me. And those are key. I have 3 little kids right now. So in full transparency, like I'm not reading that much. I'm working and I'm working with them. But I got something from LeBron James and I had heard the quote a number of times, but it was recently in an interview. He had mentioned the man in the arena, Teddy Roosevelt's kind of, the quote from his Citizenship is a Republic. And so I've started listening to that every morning. It's just a little quote that talks about the difference between the critics and, the man in the arena. And so that, for whatever reason, kind of lights me up. So it's not really a book to your question, but finding little things that almost become like a mantra. And there's so many of them, you just have to pick one, I think, that resonates and then just like ingrain it in you. And every time you hear it, you just got to boom, it gives you that like little juice of energy to be like, all right, get up, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, Anton, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on the Secrets of Fail series. I have this giant failure happening behind me. But new studios, new things you learn, and
Love
fail
it.
your way to success. So thank you for being vulnerable, and thank you for sharing your story on the Secrets of Fail series, Anton. And wishing you all the best for the future.
Thank you, my friend. Thanks for having me.